Hello and welcome to the European Resilience Initiative Center live broadcasting. This evening on Sunday, we have two very special guests. It is Anna from Ukraine and Operator Starsky. There is no need to introduce both of these speakers. Anna is a promoter of Ukrainian culture and Ukraine and language, cuisine, culture, politics, self-determination of the Ukrainians, and she has created a YouTube channel which I think is directly impacted so many of people in the West, South, East, and helped them to understand Ukraine. And we have Operator Starsky, who is a war veteran in Ukrainian National Guard, who personally participated in the battle for Hostomel Airport, which was decisive for this war. And when the Russians were not able to conquer Hostomel Airport in the first 2 days of their inglorious invasion, it was clear that they will never be able to occupy Kiev and therefore Ukraine. Welcome, Anna. Welcome, Operator Starsky. It is a huge honor and pleasure and privilege to have you as guests at our podcast.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to discuss Ukraine and this very important day with your community.
It's a big pleasure, and it's a double pleasure to see you guys here and our honorable viewers. Very nice to be here.
Thank you. And I also need to say that while we are talking now online, in a city where Anna is now, blackouts have already started, as far as I understand, or could have started like several minutes ago. The delay with the broadcasting we have experienced now was not on her side because she is extremely well prepared and technically advanced. So she has prepared power source for her live stream. The problem was on our side in Germany, and in particular on my computer. And that once again shows that in any critical situations, the Ukrainians are more creative, better prepared than the Germans, and the weak chain port is in Germany or in other Western countries, not in Ukraine. Thank you, Anna, for paying so much technical attention to the preparation. But I wanted to start this stream with the situation around the peace summit. We know that a peace summit has taken place today. It was unexpectedly well visited by a number of countries. And even those like me who are absolutely on Ukrainian side did not expect that it will be that level of success. But after all, we have seen a number of very moving speeches, a very strong communique. And it seems that most countries of the world, despite all the claims by Vladimir Putin, stay on Ukraine's side. And what are your impressions from this peace summit, Anna?
Thank you so much for the question. And I can also say that like my expectations were smaller than the reality, and I think it's always better. But I think that Ukrainian Peace Summit organized by Ukraine, Switzerland, and all of our allies is a success. And it is one of the greatest global events of the recent decade. And perhaps it was really difficult to organize it with the presence of so many countries, at least 19 or 100. We've just discussed that. 57 of them were represented by the heads of the states. And most importantly, it was around Ukraine, around the Ukrainian vision of the future, Zelensky peace formula. And it is extremely important, not only in the communique that we receive in the end, but also in all of these discussions that were held not on cameras. And so many countries, even those that were considered neutral or on the orbit of Russian support, have come. And even if some did not sign the communique, for example, but in the majority did sign. It's more than 80 countries and 4 international organizations that did sign it. But at the same time, even those who didn't, they were present. And I so much loved one of the comments left by Chancellor Scholz, who said that, no, we did not discuss Putin's recent crazy plan. And I think it's even better than discussing it or speaking about how crazy Putin is. This summit demonstrated that Russia, together with its dictator, is very far away from the global politics and decision making. And this is extremely symbolic that after 2.5 years of full-scale war, after so many difficult moments, both on the battlefield and in the diplomatic field, we do see this as a step that unites so many different countries that have different visions of the world, but at the same time, they see Russian war in Ukraine as a crime and they support Ukrainian vision of the future.
Absolutely, absolutely. And despite the fact that Chancellor Scholz did not want to discuss like what Putin said, I still wanted to mention it, not because I think it is important to discuss what he proposed or what he believed he proposed, but I think it's important to understand the whole complex of this war for information, for hearts and minds. And we have seen that Putin's it wasn't proposal, it was practically an ultimatum, a threat, like, give me your territory, give me Kherson back, give me Zaporizhia, which I have never even like occupied, give me your territory, or what? And for many, it was a sign that Putin is extremely desperate, that all this bragging and all these demands, which are absolutely delusional, that it is a sign that he understands that this war is really lost for him and for Russia. What do you think about it, Operator Starsky?
I completely agree with you. So one of the reasons he made this statement, right, he revealed those demands to Ukraine, was because the peace summit was going to start. Basically, he did it like a day before the peace summit in Switzerland. So it was, in a way, he tried, to sow discord among the countries that support Ukraine. So, like, instead of discussing Ukraine's proposals, let's better discuss Putin's plan, which basically was like, again, it's kind of cringy because Putin started the invasion and he was the one who revealed those demands in the end, like a terrorist, which he is. But currently, the situation is they lost a lot of tanks and vehicles. Out of 17,000 vehicles that were in their storages, currently they have only 9. Even less as of today, and we're talking only about the vehicles that they had in their storages. We're not talking about the vehicles that were active, right? So they're losing and already lost quite a lot of vehicles that they cannot reproduce, they cannot repair them. They still have quite a lot of tanks that will make it possible for them to continue fighting. Probably until 2027 if this dynamic continues. But again, you cannot fight only using tanks because you need vehicles to deliver your personnel. And at the same time, a majority of those vehicles that we can see in the storages using satellite images, they are there without turrets, without tracks, without different parts. So majority of them are not combat worthy. And he understands this. He also understands that the international support for Ukraine is only growing. It's nothing like it was in 2022. He understands that the military complex, the military industry of the NATO countries is accelerating. It's being rebuilt and reinforced. The European countries started producing shells in big amounts, and this production will only increase over time. So until Russia manages to achieve some kind of significant goals on the battlefield, they will come to a point when they will lose so many tanks, so they will not be able to reproduce whatsoever. At the same time, Ukraine will be receiving more and more aid. Putin loses time. He understands this, and that was one of the reasons, again, why he revealed those demands. And of course, Russian stock exchange is collapsing. So he needs time. And in order to achieve this time, in order to solve all the problems that he has, and his problems concerning, again, armored vehicles, ammunition, and personnel, because even though they have quite a few orgs there in the terrorist federation, but at the same time, they still need more because, according to their field manuals, they need 3 to 5 times more men to take our positions. They need foreign mercenaries like in the Africa, and even though they have a campaign running, they are recruiting mercenaries. It's not as good as they anticipated. That's why he needs time, and basically he wants to win this time. One of the proofs confirming that he will continue attacking Ukraine is the demand for Ukraine to refuse joining NATO. Of course, which is. It's so ridiculous. The dude literally says, like, I want you to give me territories and remain completely unprotected so I could invade you one more time. You cannot trust Putin. He already violated all kinds of agreements, all kinds of statements he ever made. And basically that was the reason why all the foreign partners that arrived to the peace summit, they didn't even waste time discussing his funny demands, because nobody trusts Putin in the world. Like half of the world, 100 countries, don't trust internationally wanted war criminal Putin. This is the fact. So that's the reason why nobody even discussed those funny demands.
I absolutely agree. And like we have got even like before this live stream, we have got like some very few, I need to say, commentaries when people said, "Oh, how can you have a peace summit without another party of the conflict?" First, it's not party of the conflict; it's aggressor. It's not a conflict; it's a war. But important is that, how do you want to have Russia on board? We had before similar conferences like Potsdam Conference 1945, Yalta Conference 1945, or Tehran Conference 1943. And neither Churchill nor Roosevelt nor other like countries came to the idea to invite like Mussolini or Hitler or someone else to that conference. It was absolutely clear you don't have a peace conference, and Potsdam Conference took place already after the war, and Yalta before the end of the war, exactly as Tehran. They were about like how we should create the post-war world, like what it should look like, how should we maintain peace stability, and think one step further. San Francisco conference, where the United Nations were founded. Do you think that someone has invited Germany to that conference to sign it? No. Read the UN Charter. In UN Charter, you will see Germany mentioned together with Japan and some other countries. You know how they are being called? Enemy state. Enemy states. And it is clearly said in the San Francisco Declaration, which was found in document for the United Nations, that these countries which have started World War II, they can be invaded once again, even without a decision of the United Nations Security Council, if they try to re-attack other nations. And nobody came to idea, okay, we cannot create a stable peace if we don't have Germany on board. No, back then in 1945, it was not an issue. Later, yes, but not in 1945 and not for years after. So I think this all like calls like to have Russia obligatory on board. Do you want to really have Lavrov, a person who lies every time when he opens his mouth? No, it will only bring toxicity. But Anna, I wanted to ask you the next question. And in particular, we have seen in amid this conference several statements, including one by Gavin McKee has donated 10 US dollar to our cause. Thank you, Gavin. And I need to tell you, we have delivered this week equipment for about 12,000 euro, so roughly 13,000 US dollar, raised within one day. Friday last week for the Ukrainian army, for the 93rd Kolodny Yar brigade, and for 2 battalions of territorial defense. The soldiers have received this equipment today and have sent already videos where they thank for this equipment, and your donation will definitely go to the same cause to bring Ukrainian army more equipment, helping to defend Ukraine and to bring peace. But Anna, back to this discussion. President Andrzej Duda of Poland has held a very passionate speech naming Russia the last colonial empire in the world, which still colonizes a lot of nations and which should be decolonized, and these nations should be free. And it is actually an idea which you explain since months on your YouTube channel, explain how Russia colonized other nations, how Russia erased identity of other nations. What do you feel when you see that your ideas are so passionately spread for months and years now get repeated by state leaders?
Well, thank you for putting this question that way. I do think they share these ideas, or they also had them before me, because those countries that were once occupied by the Russian Empire or the Soviet Union, or were too close to its toxic borders, they really well know what Russia is. That's why you may notice that those countries like Finland, like Poland, like the Baltics, they never have questions whether we should wait for the complete defeat of Russia. They are not trying to be tolerant with the aggressor. I think that at a certain moment, maybe in those dark months when we lacked support and decisiveness, something major happened, and many of our allies became more decisive. And finally, deep inside, or their communities, that decision makers have come to this conclusion that Russia is an aggressor. It is not a party to negotiate with. And actually, their active presence and their passionate speeches on the peace summit is a signal to that. Same as new sanctions, which actually target not only Russia, but its ally China, indirectly, in disguise. But the most important hit is actually on the Chinese banks, Chinese export of electric cars, and many other things. And we know that China is very much about economy, and its market with the EU and the US, North America in general, is like 7-8 times larger than with Russia. And it may actually somehow influence China. Unfortunately, we do have to influence this to stop supporting Russia. One of the greatest problems is that for years, and all because of this Iron Curtain, I hate and I love this metaphor. It is actually not a metaphor. It was a physical barrier that hid so many beautiful countries, so many diverse nations from the rest of the world. And that's why for the majority of people, Russia seemed like a homogeneous, unitary state consisting of just Russian people. And when I started my vlog, I had advice, Anna, keep it simple, because for many, your country was just a rebellious part, a problematic part of Russia, but nothing different. It's not just about Ukraine or Belarus. It's also about Moldova, Czech Republic, let's be honest, the Baltics, and so on. And in this great Russian literature that so many quoted and wanted to preserve, that is also a part of Russian propaganda in the world, Tolstoy describes how the world. We have Germany, and after Germany, we have Russia. No countries between Germany and Russia. And somehow this message, this propaganda message, was present in people's minds, and they are not to be blamed for that. Like, we were not active. And the problem is that this message is not just the one that Russia spread during this decade. It was a part of consciousness of generations of people in the West. Like, their parents, their great parents, and they treated Russia as one big country, when in reality, the Russian Federation consists of 22 national republics, and Russia is just one of them. For example, in 90s, Tatarstan wanted to proclaim independence. We see serious movements in Bashkortostan protests. Of course, these people are suppressed. Russia does not act as a federation, but as a very centralized power. And to be able to develop independence movements, people need to form their national elite. And Putin does everything for this not to happen. But in reality, the potential is great, because all of these peoples are very different in linguistic perspective, in their culture, religion, family traditions, and so on. And many of them do not identify themselves as Russians. I'm not saying about, let's say, Chechen people or Tatar people, but even in Russia, there are lots of people who say they are Siberians, not Russians, but Siberians. And this is a great potential, actually. And many forget that, for example, those republics of the Caucasus were conquered in the very second part of the 19th century. So they are a part of the Russian Empire, not for that long even. And contrary to other empires, Russia, I love this argument, I don't remember where I've heard it, but Russia was weak enough to conquer countries across the seas, so it simply expanded through the next bordering countries. But at the same time, the potential for this liberation movements and new countries appearing on the territory of the Russian Federation is really great. And I think that it is the only way to this stable peace. Because once again, it's really difficult to control such a big territory without this authoritarian state. Just look at these really big countries. The majority of them are not very democratic. So this is the way to stable peace, but for ages, many of our allies are still afraid of that. And that might be one of those reasons why we did not see a clear strategy of like, who needs to win, because we don't want Ukraine to lose, we don't want Russia to lose, because if Russia loses, it collapses, and we are afraid of that, because who controls nuclear weapons? Do you feel safe with Putin controlling nuclear weapons? Then they say, oh, Kadyrov may control nuclear weapons in Chechnya. How will you feel about that? If Putin disappears, he is in The Hague, he is imprisoned, Kadyrov is with him. And it is a task of the next peace summit or the one after it to develop this new strategy of peace. And how do we help this process be democratic, safe, and so on? We have to participate. We have to be active participants. Putin often uses our democracy against us, trying to persuade we cannot interfere into the Russian Federation. Not even militarily, but sometimes even from, I don't see serious information strategies from the EU or the US targeted inside Russia. But we do have to do it, just as it was after the defeat of the Nazi Germany. Thank you.
Absolutely. I have nothing to add here. And indeed, the Western leaders, or some of them, are so much afraid that nuclear weapons get into wrong hands. But Lavrov's hands, or Putin's hands, or Shoigu's hands are not right, okay? We don't remember, like, I'm not a friend by far of the terrorist and genocidal regimes like Iran or North Korea. They're absolutely criminal, evil, ugly regimes which shall disappear. But have you ever heard the Iranian leader to openly threatening to nuke like Washington, etc.? Of course, he does once like a period of time, but Putin is doing this every time. Still, we think that Iran is a terrorist regime. For right, and Iran has been officially named a terrorist regime, but Russian Federation is not, because it's such a great country, such a huge culture. You know what? The biggest reason for us to believe that Russia is a great country is a Mercator projection of the map, which makes countries which are closer to the poles in the north and in the south look great. If you put on Google Maps Russia on equator size, it is not even big enough to like to be as big as Africa from west to east coast. It would be like fitting into central part of Africa. And it's not a huge country. It has like 140 million people. Economy is smaller than economy of Japan, which is the same size of the population, but much smaller on geographic scale. It is not a huge country as long as you don't let Russia appear huge. But once again, these words about Russia's greatness are always being repeated in the West. And you Anna nailed it when like people just repeat without thinking that Russia is great and ignoring positions of the nations occupied by Russia. At Operator Starsky, you have a pretty much experience with dealing with foreign um, politicians and representatives of the political elites. You were for a longer time in Germany on your way, like dealing with this promotion of Ukrainian narratives. And recently we have seen the pretty bad development in Germany, where pro-Russian, far-right and far-left parties received unexpectedly many votes during Europarlament elections. And practically the far-right and the far-left have got as many votes as all three coalition parties. How do you feel? Is it a dangerous development with Russia using these parties as their tools and their assets to promote their narratives?
Yeah, absolutely. We can see a dangerous development, not only in Germany, in other countries as well. Far-right parties in the EU received, I would say, 13 more seats, or 14. And this is a direct result of the Russian misinformation campaign, which was ongoing, which was taking place in Europe for the past 2 years, specifically after the beginning of the Russian invasion. And it's a direct result of governments basically doing nothing, or in most optimistic scenarios, doing not enough to protect their citizens against Russian misinformation. Luckily, we can see that some of the countries already realized this problem, and we were talking about success of the peace summit, right? Anna was saying that she didn't expect so many countries to visit the summit, to be active and actively participate in it, and which is only my assumption, but I think it happened after different leaders and different representatives of the civilized world, like Mike Johnson included, by the way, and several other leaders, they started revealing that their intelligence was delivering different information regarding the Russian hybrid warfare that takes place in Europe, Russian hybrid warfare against civilized world, against Western countries. I believe that this was exactly the reason why currently we can see that all of our partners completely changed their position, and they started expressing more support to Ukraine, because during these 2 years they were collecting information, they were collecting data on the upcoming Russian plans, upcoming Russian actions, and currently they realize the whole picture. Now, that is, in my opinion, that is the main reason, maybe the only reason why they realize that if they don't support Ukraine now, they will have to deal with Russian invaders or pro-Russian forces inside of their own countries very, very soon. Of course, I don't have much details regarding this, but considering the fact that the intelligence data was mentioned several times in the United States, in Europe, in Germany as well, by the way, I believe that that's the reason. Another problem is we still have to see mechanisms of countering Russian propaganda and misinformation implemented in countries like Germany. Because, well, yeah, even despite the fact that already like 3 spies were exposed in the AfD, the German pro-Russian party. One of them escaped to Russia, one was spying for Russia, one was spying for China. It's like, I don't know, you can like throw a stone at AfD and hit a spy or a propagandist, but we still have to see those mechanisms being implemented and bringing results. And in order for this to happen, governments have to be very, very much engaged into countering Russian propaganda. Situation is not hopeless, but I would not say that it's very, very optimistic right now.
Indeed. And by the way, before we go further, I want to thank Ladybird 1979, and I want to thank Julian Basescu for having joined our subscription program. They both have chosen to be resilience heroes. Check this subscription program on our YouTube channel, and all the money you donate, they go directly to our Ukraine-related projects. And first and foremost, for technical support for the Ukrainian army. Next week, I will bring the next batch of drones, fully crowdfunded, mostly from the German money. And that is the moment when I'm very proud of my compatriots in Germany who donate money for Ukraine, seeing that Chancellor Scholz is not the fastest person who does this. So a lot of Germans step in and fund Ukrainian army with their donation. So thank you so much. Also, thank you to Paul Gilbert for his donation and for his call. Let Russia return to the borders of Muscovy. Absolutely agree. Wise word and good wish. But coming back to what you have described, we have now a question like from the audience, which was left just minutes before we started. We have started our live stream. How do you want to fight against Russian bot farms? And I would love to address this question to both of you. We luckily do not have Russian bots here in our chat. I hope they will not appear before we end this live stream. But we have seen them all on Twitter. We have seen them all on other social networks. They really come in dozens. And it looks like the more we try to fight them, the more of these trolls come because they are pretty cheap. What is your experience with fighting them, and how do you think what would be the best way to stop this Russian propaganda? And are they effective after all? Because like some of their takes are really, really stupid.
Anna?
Well, there are different kinds of Russian trolls, just as different kinds of Russian orcs. What a magical land. Some are very, I'd say, safe, because these are automatically created messages that simply spoil, not spoil, sometimes they heat up the discussions, for example, below the video, and they don't cause any trouble because you see it's a repeated message, it does not have anything specific. But trolls can also be a signal of success. Whenever you have an important topic that reached a larger audience, trolls will appear. But unfortunately, there are some that can be dangerous seriously, and these are, I think, to some extent, maybe even real people working for something. For example, when we had the NEFO campaign on the channel, and we've managed to buy 2 trucks and lots of drones and so on, I had trolls coming and saying that, for example, the units for which we were collecting the money, they do not exist, or they have escaped from the front lines and now they are under research. And was actually one case that was on the news in Ukraine, but it was really far away from the unit that we connected, but they were even providing links and so on. So you realize whenever the online action can grow into something bigger, they become more and more active and more dangerous, because some of our actions and the support of your community and these donations, they actually become drones, they actually become trucks, they actually become real means of fight against Russia. And unfortunately, most of social media, from what I observe, they are commercially oriented and they turn on this filtering mechanisms, but they are very far from ideal. And for example, whenever a new conflict or war appears on the planet, you may feel like this filter is getting stronger, but they also prevent normal communication. So honestly, I haven't come up with the decision how to prevent that. I have scammers on the channel from time to time, but I think that's the problem of most of channels. But perhaps this war, media literacy, or something different should become a new topic in the world, with all the technologies, AI developing and other things. And maybe Operator Starsky has an answer how to fight that.
First of all, thank you for your ideas. I think they are spot on. Another thing, Sergej mentioned that some of the ideas that are shared by the bots are completely stupid, and it's very, very cool that you said so, because it proves one thing. It's, again, from the standpoint of the communication specialist, the problem is they might sound stupid for you, but for the target audience they are directed at, they may sound legit, because all kinds of informational operations, they are aimed at specific target audience. That is why, for example, it's kind of hard to conduct such informational operations against, for example, the UK, because British people, as our common friend Jonathan thinks, they're kind of immune to the Russian propaganda, which is partially true. Every information campaign has its target audience. In Russia's case, the target audience on the West is all kinds of people that can fight against other social groups. So they are targeting rich people against poor people, and vice versa. They target black people versus white people, and vice versa. And wherever they can find a crack in the society in a specific country based on specific target group, it's age, gender, religious views, political views, etc., they will hit this target audience. Some people may be, of course, immune to those messages and narratives. Some people will gladly accept them because this is something that they feel. And I'm playing with this beautiful patch here. I'm sorry. In this case, Russians are targeting, of course, people that can be easily manipulated into believing like conspiracy theories and things like that. And such people are, unfortunately, they make majority of our society, because, again, the Russian informational terrorists, let's call them this way, they use all classic tricks to make their narratives work. They use scandals, they use so-called black information in the meaning that it's like dark, it contains some negativity, and such information can be spread like easily, like instantly throughout the internet. It takes negative news approximately 3 times less time, right, to reach target audience than some kind of positive news or news report. That's why it works so well. And another thing is how to fight Russian propagandists. Of course, we have to fight them by exposing their lies. It works indeed. For those who don't believe me, please check out the New York Times 5 years ago made a documentary called Operation Infection, where they clearly explained with the help of the Russian KGB spies that went to West, they explained 7 easy steps the Russians create their informational viruses and how they implement them. So fighting Russian propagandists with exposing their lies is currently the most effective way. It works. It does. How can we fight Russian bot farms? Of course, there's only one way to fight them, is to shutting them down. As of 2023, the Security Service of Ukraine, together with other intelligence agencies of the world, managed to shut down 1.6 fake accounts, which were unique user accounts, but they were fake, and they were basically copy-pasting same messages over and over again in the commentaries throughout internet on different social medias. It's like it's like a population of a tiny country, right? So the bot farms must be shut down completely without any remorse, because it's not freedom of speech. They are not even real people. We can literally dispose of them technically, right? So this is something that must be done. Of course, Russians spent tremendous resources on creating those bots and software to manage them, but closing bot farms, it's much cheaper and much cost effective than creating them and running them. So this is my opinion.
Absolutely. And thank you, Duncan23, for your donation, $20. Wow. We will send this money into the equipment which we purchased for the Ukrainian army, as we do with all the donations which we receive. Thank you so much for staying for Ukraine. That what you just said, Operator Starsky, these bots. I remember the recent interview by Margarita Simonyan, a very nasty and toxic person who is practically a chief at Russia Today, which all like the propaganda lies TV channel and web page network, RT. And she literally said in her interview, she was laughing even, like, look, she said, it is so easy to create a bot farm. And while the Americans spent hours and days and months to shut down one of our bot farms, we can create 2 or 3, because it is more expensive for them to look for these farms, to create a legal statement why the bot farms should be shut. And for us, she said, it's very easy to create it because, of course, they never question the need to violate international law and our national laws and to harm us. And that is what they do. They just like attack anything in a hope that some of these attacks will bring success. But Anna, I wanted to ask you in this context, the Russians are clearly attacking Ukrainian society much more than maybe any Western society besides Ukraine. Like Ukraine is the country number 1 in the West which Russia attacks, both military means and informational means. How do you feel these Russian attacks in Ukraine? What topics do they use, and what is overall the mood in the Ukrainian society in this 3rd year of a very hard war, which nobody in Ukraine wanted to have?
Well, that's a difficult question to answer. And, when Andrei was sharing his vision on how to work with bots, actually blocking them, destroying these farms, I thought this would be a good idea for Russian media too. Just like sanctioning their companies, their banks, we should sanction at this moment all of their informational sources, because they are pretty evil, even the ones that pretend to be democratic in the way they spread their messages. I remember working on a documentary series for Ukrainian television, The Great Russian Lies. We've looked at how it plays in different areas of life that are far away from the military or economic field. And for example, cinema, when the Cannes Festival invites a Russian dissident director because he's against Putin. And in his very first speech, he says that Ukrainian and Russian people are victims, and Russian men taken away from their families are also victims, the ones that came to kill Ukrainians. So making us equal when we are definitely very different. We stand for our territory, we protect our motherland, we do not invade anyone. I think that this war in general have made Ukraine a very media literate country. I do remember how at the start of this war, people were sharing explosion sites, everything. And then when we realized it can cost you life, people stopped doing that. And in Russia, you can see the country, you can literally watch every Ukrainian drone coming, and they are really bad language, how they observe that and so on. You sometimes feel what's wrong with these people, but then you remember these are Russians, okay. Of course, there are lots of sensitive topics in any society, and why I actually think that the idea to ban any Russian sources would be smart, at least during this wartime, is because they know how to design their messages very tailored to a particular society. And for example, if Britain is not prone to some direct moments, we don't know if they influenced, I don't know, Brexit or other stuff, or causing some chaos elsewhere in other countries. They tailor specific messages and they bring them into the societies. And of course, in Ukraine, they use the mobilization process that is not simple. It was very active during this delay in the US aid. It was so active, like, oh, nobody's gonna help you, and so on and so forth. And there are many other. But in general, I also agree with a different vision that many Ukrainian philosophers, like intellectuals support, that without this war, many Ukrainians would have still been under the influence of this Russian colonial culture, and other stuff still on their orbit. But this war actually separated us more than ever before. And to some extent, Putin achieved just the contrary of what he wanted. He wanted to denationalize Ukraine when he actually made us more united than ever. And I don't see anyone after 2 years, almost two and a half, like almost 3 years of war and 10 years of war in general, I do not see anyone taking seriously any options like to negotiate with Russia. This only makes Ukrainians laugh, makes angry, even when we are shelled, even when we have these blackouts. In all of these situations, no one I hope, and I have reasons to believe that this divide between Ukraine and Russia is like for the next couple of centuries, until new democratic countries will shape on that big territory.
Absolutely. I remember how the pulse looked like in Ukraine before 2014, before Russia annexed Crimea in violation of international law, and later the same year invaded Donbass, Donetsk, and Luhansk regions. And we know that back then, over 90% of Ukrainians looked actually positively to Russia, because Ukrainians are nice people. They don't love to have enemies. They are not aggressive. They actually are pretty forgiving people, and they're good-hearted people. And over 90% said, okay, like Russians are different, but we don't see them as enemies. And then Russia attacked Ukraine, and we remember how Ukrainian army couldn't believe their eyes in Crimea, and they even tried to negotiate with the Russian soldiers, which was like, from the today's perspective, an absolute like crazy idea, because how can you negotiate with people who come to kill you? But the Ukrainians didn't believe that Russians can be that evil and come to kill them. So then the perception of Russia dropped, and 50% said, okay, Russia is an enemy, but still 50% believed, okay, maybe they're not all that bad, maybe it's Putin, etc. And it took this invasion and these cruel, incredibly cruel crimes by very average Russian soldiers, conscripts and professional soldiers, and all these celebration parties in neighboring regions to Ukraine, where people gathered on the streets to cheer the Russian missiles flying on the heads of Ukrainian civilians, and filmed these missile launches and cheered and were singing songs. And that like is really the nail into this coffin of the Soviet and Russian imperial produced idea, which the Russians used to manipulate Ukrainians and to convince them that they don't need to have their own national identity, that they just need to be subordinated to Russia because that's what they need. And I also hope, Anna, that this idea is dead forever, and we will see it very soon. But what I wanted to ask later, is we are moving from this very important point of ideological and mental separation from Russia. The war is still far from being over, and we see that Russians try desperately attack Ukraine from the Kharkiv region once again. We see severe fighting in around Avdiivka, Kurakhove tonight, this night. The units with which we are in contact and which we will supply with drones and other equipment reported many severe attacks by the Russians this night. And Ukraine still waits for weapon deliveries. Ukraine still waits for enough artillery shells and for air defense. What is the situation on this field, Operator Starsky?
So indeed, currently we are expecting, first of all, our new jet fighters to arrive. They, some of the guys call them a game changer. I cannot say that F-16s will help us win the war, but of course they will make this task much easier. What I can say from the reports received by my guys is that they literally tell me that they have never seen so many rockets for HIMARS systems in their lives, basically, and now they can finally properly operate HIMARS systems and strike targets with the munitions that already have much higher range than before. Our artillery starts operating also much more frequently, which is again very good news for our infantry in the first place. But we also must understand that not all of the promised military aid was delivered to Ukraine, unfortunately, and we still expect a lot of pieces of equipment, including ammunition, to be delivered. Currently, the aid from our partners, from the United States and European allies, helped us with Kharkiv Russian attack. Even though this attack didn't stop, even though there's still combat taking place in this area, especially in Vovchansk, but we know that these shells that we received, the missiles that we received, they helped us to remove a lot of Russian tanks and a lot of Russian armored vehicles, making it very hard for Russians to conduct successful assaults and gain significant goals. That's why Russian highly advertised campaign on Kharkiv failed so dramatically, and we can talk about the collapse of this operation. Currently, in the area of Kurachovo, Pokrovsk, we can see a bit different picture. We know that Russian terrorists from areas like Kharkiv, like Bakhmut, are being relocated, I believe, closer to Pokrovsk direction, which is again very, very crucial for Russian terrorists. But with the increasing support of our allies, I'm 100% sure that we can continue the active defense. And, you know, again, after Putin's statement that we all heard 2 days ago, I'm more than ever sure that Russian terrorism will be defeated, 100%, even though I was kind of depressed, you know, kind of pessimistic this winter and spring, especially when I was losing my brothers in arms, people I knew in the area of Kharkiv, in the area of Bakhmut, Liman as well. But this time, I'm more than ever sure that Russian position is shaking and Russian terrorism can and will be defeated.
Absolutely, and that will be the case sooner or later. The bad thing is that Russia could have been defeated earlier if the West would have provided Ukraine with everything Ukraine needed in early 22. But as Anna mentioned already, and as you have mentioned, there is a landslide change in the mood of the Western politicians and the Western societies to the need for defeat, for final defeat of Russian imperialism is here, and there will be no peace before Russian imperialism is not defeated. And thank you, Jimbo, for $9.99 your donation. That is amazing. Thank you so much. And also, thank you so much for Anna and Operator Starsky that you have joined this stream, and we are talking about the situation in Ukraine, the situation with support for Ukraine, and we see how audience is active. And if I would have quoted every comment which says that Anna and Operator Starsky are great people and favorite YouTubers, I would not give you guys like any chance to speak, because the chat is really exploding out of comments how great you are and how people love what you do and what you talk. But staying with the topic of the arms, we had again some questions before in the community chat, and people asked, for example, can Ukraine develop their own air defense systems? I think Ukraine has some and modified them. Think about efficient destruction of 2 of Russian A-50 AVAX planes, long-range flying radars, which have been killed by Ukrainian deep modified S-200 systems, if I'm not mistaken. But still, I would love to hear what Operator Starsky or Anna think about it, about weapons development in Ukraine. And here is very interesting question, which I got before this live stream from Real Science 948. And the question is, are Ukrainians willing to accept losing Donetsk and Luhansk as a worst case situation? Because Crimea, Kherson, Zaporizhia are vital to Ukraine's future survival, and Ukraine can take it all back realistically. Unless Putin is gone, his army is kaput. Well, I think this is a very interesting question, despite the very sad perspective that this question pictures. As we know, the war doesn't have predicted future, and we are very optimistic now. We know we support Ukrainian army. We know Ukrainian army is absolutely capable and creative and has strong moral. But we can also imagine in some scenario like immediate stop of support for Ukraine because of some reasons. China attacks Taiwan and all the attention goes there, or in the United States, new president suddenly decides to cut all programs. Many things can happen. What is the mood regarding this fight in the worst case scenario, which can still happen, although not very probable?
Andrei first, perhaps.
Thank you. Okay, regarding giving up Donetsk and Luhansk region, imagine you have 5 kids and you are told, give us several kids or we will kill all of you. What is your reaction? Okay, which of your kids would you give to a terrorist or a criminal who wants to kill you? Do you have your favorite kid? Please answer yourself. Okay, this question to yourself. Regarding, there was a question in the chat whether we're reading this chat. Yes, we do. Regarding the air defenses, of course, Ukraine can produce its own air defenses, and we actually do that. But we don't have mass production of the not even anti-air launchers, but the missiles, right? Currently, there are systems that are modified to accept, for example, NATO missiles like AIM-120, so-called Frank and Sam. But at the same time, people must understand one thing. In order to build a factory that produces like rounds, right? It may take 2 to 5 years. If you want to create a factory that builds shells, that's approximately the same amount of time, like 4 or 5 years. If you want to create something more sophisticated and produce missiles, especially anti-air missiles, on the industrial scale, that is 5-7 years optimistically, because it requires, first of all, resources, it requires some specific area logistics, it requires personnel, it requires peace. Okay, because you cannot have factory located there where it can be hit by Russian long-range missiles. That is why, for example, currently we see that Western countries, NATO countries, they only started increasing production, increasing their military production, increasing missiles and 155 millimeter shells for Ukrainian artillery. That was once Western artillery. That is why it takes so much time. Unfortunately, you see, guys, unlike Russia, Ukraine was not prepared to invade, okay? And Ukraine did not really expect that its closest neighbor that recognized its international borders in 2003, Putin himself signed this memorandum with Kuchma, recognizing like borders and Crimea, that was calling us brothers, that said numerous times that it's not gonna interfere with the Ukrainian internal business because it's not Russia's business. So Ukraine did not expect that they would like invade and start killing us for real, raping babies, killing children, bombing and destroying civilian houses and stealing toilets, right? So that's why instead of stockpile weapons, unlike Russia, we were not doing that. We were adopting reforms, implementing money wherever we could, to like increase quality of life, and things like that. Same with NATO, same with the West. West had a lot of problems besides like Russia, right? West had a lot of like internal problems, like reforms, building roads, right? Social programs. So unlike Russia, we were not stockpiling weapons. Unlike Russia, we were not training hundreds of thousands of troops for the war that was gonna come, right? For the war that Putin was preparing for us. That is the problem. That is why these supplies, building those factories, takes so much time.
Fully support everything said by Andriy, and we have to be honest. All the democratic world, including the countries that now stand with us, back like after the collapse of the Soviet Union, many of them worked hard to demilitarize Ukraine together with Russia, to de-arm us. And signing Budapest Memorandum in the healthy world would not be a great mistake. This would be a beautiful example of a safer future. And that's why, from one point of view, I do understand this was our mistake. But when we look at the context, at the very idea of this giving up your nuclear weapons for good, this is a beautiful message, an example to follow by others. But unfortunately, the world is full of people like Putin. So many believe that Russia should be a guarantee of peace, and all the countries around Russia were heavily demilitarized with the support of Western democracies. And many of our weapons were sent to Russia within these programs. And now we are targeted with these missiles taken away from Ukrainian territories. Plus, of course, it's impossible to develop good production of weapons when the majority of our even existing abandoned factories are within the reach of Russian missiles. Russia produces them on that territory. That's because we cannot reach them, or we are just allowed to use on a very narrow territory close to the border. So they feel completely safe. But even with that, they produce low quality missiles in this force schedules, working schedules, and they bomb Belgorod like crazy. But they target Ukrainian supermarkets. So of course they will not give us this opportunity. Also, drones are changing to some extent a lot, and this is, I think, one of the greatest achievements, the army of drone in Ukraine. But there was an idea of collecting these drones in every Ukrainian house, but most of the military don't like it to that extent, because once again, drones are weapons. They can save your life, but they also require this maintenance and high quality control. Like, it's not something that you can like cook borscht in your home. Nothing bad happens if it's not tasty. But if a drone is not working properly, this can lead to dramatic results. And your question about Donetsk and Luhansk. In this doomsday scenario, we will not have the need to give Donetsk and Luhansk, because Russia will then take everything, if we look at this very negative scenario. So just as Andriy, I've been up and down during these years of war. And I realized that even if China attacks Taiwan and this distracts attention from us, that will pass. 2 months will pass and the attention will be drawn to something different. Or, I don't know, if the US president abandons us, there are allies in Europe and so on. There are bad periods and good periods. Our task is to survive until the final defeat of Russia. But let's look from this practical point of view. When Russia annexed Crimea, what was the message? Oh, let's appease them, let's not escalate. What was the next move? Donetsk and Luhansk regions. Then frozen periods, Minsk agreements, the world pretending that everything is under control. What do we have next? Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. So, of course, no inch of Ukrainian territory can be given up to the aggressor. And on this emotional note, these are not just territories. These are people's homes. These are lives, how Ukrainians are treated under this occupation. These are schools. These are graveyards, even. So it's not just like a piece of the map that you can give and that will stop. No, every inch of Ukrainian territory must be back home to 1991 borders. And our greatest move is that we will not demand other Ukrainian territories that are now part of Russia.
Yeah, it's absolutely agree, and that is also what one of our commentators, Ladybird 1979, wrote. Not an inch. Of course, Ukraine is practically demonstrating that Ukraine is much more into this concept, not an inch, than NATO, because Ukraine fights for its territory. We know that NATO, despite all the really good and hawkish, in good sense of this word, statements of its leaders, a Russian airplane violates a NATO space, NATO airspace. Recently, 2 days ago, Swedish, but before Romania, Poland, Finland, other countries, and Russian airplane flights back without any consequence. We know out of history that once it happened in 2016, early 2016 in Turkey, Erdogan just shut down 2 Russian air jets, fighter bomber jets, and there was like no reaction from Russia. There was like some hot air from Lavrov and from Putin. They threatened Turkey with sanctions. Not even sanctions have been introduced, but no Russian jet dared after that to violate airspace of Turkey. So Ukraine, which is fighting for its territory and for every inch of its land, demonstrates much more decisiveness and strength than much better equipped states from the NATO alliance, because Ukrainians know what it's about. It's not about some negotiation with terrorists, but it's about if your people get under occupation and get tortured, raped, killed, or they remain free and live free. I want to thank also 2 more donors who have donated for our campaign in this stream. It's Pat S with $10 donations and Pilot Pete with $4.99. Thank you guys so much. Your money will be invested in a good cause in support of Ukrainian army. And I want to continue this talk with you, Anna, with the next question of this whole war you have mentioned already. It is also about the Ukrainian society understanding what it's all about, with a very bloody price, very painful price. But Ukrainian society now is not the Ukrainian society 3 years ago or 10 years ago. And one day, Ukrainian army will liberate territories which Russia occupied 10 years ago. Donetsk, Luhansk, Crimea. How can Ukraine get these territories back in full sense? People who lived there, they were exposed to Russian propaganda. They were brainwashed. Many of them were traumatized. Those who were in the resistance were arrested, tortured, killed. Kids who went to school when they were 6 or 7 in 2015, now they are 16, 17. They can be conscripted into the Russian army. They have never seen nothing from free Ukraine because they were brainwashed from the first school class. How can Ukraine save these people from this Russian toxicity?
Well, I think that half of the problem will be solved when many of the Russian people who were actually brought to these territories to change the cultural landscape will leave. And I don't think that we live in the 21st century, of course, no organized movements and so on, but these people will leave if they are true believers of Ruski Mir, and losing it in Ukraine, they will return back to their homes by their own wish, not Ukraine making them do that, but simply because they dislike this new world. Second, many people who have actually experienced what Ruski Mir is, even being its supporters or quite neutral to Russia, greatly changed their opinion after they experience living there. And we see that actually at the beginning of this invasion, Putin believed that many of cities close to the border with Russia will be very pro-Russian and will greet soldiers with flowers, but we greet them with flowers for their graves, not the one in bouquets. And so seeing what Ruski Mir has done to Luhansk, to Donetsk, which was a booming business center, hosted Euro, 2012, if I'm not mistaken. And what it has turned this beautiful city in is very dramatic. Once again, there is a huge cultural and social level of life difference between Ukraine and Russia. And we've all witnessed that when these wild orcs saw middle class in Bucha, Irpin, Hostomel, and the way they live. There is a huge gap between an ordinary Ukrainian lives and an ordinary Russian lives. And we all know that this normal life, an ability to travel, an ability to study, an ability to change your politicians, to influence your local authorities, is something that people start liking when they have this opportunity. So even those who were brainwashed, when they get normal life, I'm sure they will quickly switch to that side. Plus, dealing with really zombified people, I hope that this Ukrainian victory will mean the collapse of the Kremlin regime. And then we will have a larger task than the population of temporarily occupied Ukrainian territory. Then we will have the whole Russia to work with. And what bothers me that there is no plan. But there should be a plan. And it's not the military, it's not a bloody plan, it's something that many specialists in communication, for example, within the EU, may already think about. What shall we do with all of these people? We know that Germans were taken to these concentration camps to see the results of their crime. The world is so tolerant right now that I'm afraid they will not take Russians to see what they've done to Mariupol or elsewhere, because they will be traumatized and so on. But we have to realize that we're dealing with a very criminal population at the moment, because once again, in those tanks in Ukraine, it's not Putin. And those comments cheering up for the killing of Ukrainian children, these are not Putin or Lavrov. And we have millions of such people in Russia. And this is a great trouble for the world and the future of the world. So de-zombify them is a task, and it cannot be, it cannot be sweet. It cannot be always comfortable. It's just like a person for committing a crime goes to prison, or maybe this is a good prison, I don't know, the one that treats him psychologically right, provides him with education and so on, but still, that's a prison. It cannot be a resort or something else. So a serious program for de-zombifying of the Russian population, or let's say people zombified by Russian propaganda, must be developed for their own survival and for the security of the world. And unfortunately, this process cannot be comfortable and sweet for the participants.
Absolutely. And we all know that the Ukrainian society has developed a really, really strong and creative approach to all threats which Ukrainian society has faced recently. I'm pretty sure after this war will end with Ukraine's victory, Ukraine will be an anchor of absolutely like new systems, new structures of world security, of European security. And we don't know what will happen to Russia after Russia will be defeated. Of course, for Vladimir Putin personally, it will be end of his career, maybe of his life. Who knows? But it is not about Putin only. It is Russia's war, not Putin's war. It is a continuation of a long war Russia waged against Ukraine for at least 200-300 years. And it will not end with a personal end of Vladimir Putin. Even with Ukraine's victory, it will not end forever. To be able to stop this war, the world needs to completely demilitarize and reform Russia. And from my perspective, I personally believe that it is only possible with Russia being split voluntarily or not into several states. Each of them will start developing their new identity, exactly as the Soviet Union been split into several countries. Many of them have regained their independence, but some of them have got their independence for the first time in their history. These states mostly are peaceful states. Not of them are democracies. Like think about Turkmenistan, for example. It's not a democracy. Even Azerbaijan is not, but some of them are exceptional democracies, like the Baltic states, and some of them, like Ukraine, have went a very hard, complicated way, and now are really a beacon of light of democracy and fight for peace in the world. So for sure, Russia being split into different countries, none of them will be democratic, but each of them will have a chance to be a peaceful democracy, and none of them, even undemocratic ones, will have a capacity to threaten the world with world war and with a massive aggression because of their size, because of quite different weight. But what do you think, Anna and Andrei, about the post-war Ukraine? What kind of country it will be, and what alliances it will participate?
I believe that alliances are built based on the threats, right? So if we're talking about the Russian threat, if Russia still exists after the Ukrainian victory, or if Russian terrorism doesn't exist, but there are different other threats, like, for example, threats from other totalitarian regimes that are still there, and we still have to face them, right? So I believe that Ukraine, with its vast experience in not only fighting on the battlefield, not only direct combat experience, but also experience in countering propaganda and will be a very, very valuable ally to any European country and to any country of the civilized world. I honestly believe so. At the same time, of course, I believe that we will have to solve a lot of problems within our country to fight our corruption, to fight all those things that make us less transparent. We have to become more transparent. We have to become more democratic and developed, right? Comparing to other countries, if we want to have opportunity to offer some kind of partnership that can be positive for all the parties, which I believe we will do 100%, because after this war is finished, there will be a lot of work inside of the country. I'm sure all of the countries that supported Ukraine will definitely help us to improve, to become more transparent, to become a reliable partner and ally for Europe and for the civilized free world. I am 100% sure that this is exactly what happens.
I see Ukraine as a member of NATO and the European Union, and I think we deserve, and not only we deserve, but this is a mutually beneficial partnership, because once again, I share Andrei's opinion that we have a lot of expertise right now, both on the military battlefield, because I know that lots of Ukrainian soldiers who go on trainings, they also surprise the trainers with their knowledge of a big war, because Russian war in Ukraine is perhaps the largest war in Europe since the end of the Second World War. And all these drones and all these new technologies that people rarely use in smaller military campaigns somewhere far away from their motherlands. And of course, counterfighting Russian propaganda. So anyway, we are experts at the moment. It was not our choice, but now this is in our survival mode. And I think we will stay a militarized country. That's extremely important for our security and survival. And I hope more reforms will come to Ukrainian army too. And that people, they have to be well trained and well prepared too, because unfortunately, Russia will not disappear, and the centuries of this imperial character will still be present. It may be hidden, but it will disappear during years. So we have to be prepared for the safety and security of Ukraine and the safety and security of Europe and the world.
I absolutely would love to have Ukrainian experts in every intelligence service of any NATO country, like being advisors on counterterrorism, counterintelligence, and counter sabotage. I would love to have like Ukrainians teaching our German counterintelligence how to deal with Russian threat. It is absolutely vital when we have a look at what is going on in Germany, like what kind of narratives are being sometimes spread here. I say, oh gosh, I would love that Ukrainians would have advised our politicians how to deal with the Russian threat, because that is what Ukrainians know, like how it works and how the Russians do that. And the Ukrainians like know what is the consequence of that. But well, for that, first of all, of course, Ukraine needs to be a NATO member with full access of Ukrainian officers to NATO meetings. But I hope that it will happen one day. I want to thank Dankno 23 for another generous donation of $50. Thank you so much. And this money once again will go into projects which support Ukrainian army. Next week, I will bring the new batch of drones to the 47th Mechanized Brigade, fighting close to Avdiivka front, like at Avdiivka direction. Practically, they were defending Avdiivka. They were forced by the Russians to move back like for several hundred meters to kilometers because of the lack of artillery shells the 47th Brigade suffered from. But we supplied them all the time with drones, which helped them to keep the line. And the next batch will be delivered next week. I personally will bring them the drones to the brigade and hope to see the guys soon, and will greet them from you. Thank you so much for your donations. And maybe because I know that Anna is participating in that stream among a blackout in her city in Ukraine, and just think that she has like managed to have like all these power sources and power supply to join you in this stream and to talk to you. Absolutely amazing, unthinkable. Thank you, Anna. That
That's
maybe
my
the
pleasure.
last. Yeah, but thinking about like what we are talking now, the Peace Summit, Reconstruction Conference, and other development. Um, what are the most severe problems which Ukraine needs to explain to the West to get Western support and solidarity in that field? I know that there are a lot of them, from like environmental problems and the Russians like killing environment in Ukraine, up to demining situation, from the artillery shells to jets, from countering Russian propaganda to kicking Russia out of the United Nations Security Council. But what would be the field number one where you would concentrate? First Anna and then maybe Andrei.
I think many underestimate the size of this war. And many questions come together with that, like when they think how many artillery or how many more things Ukraine needs. War is so big and war is extremely violent, and many things they get destroyed in a day, in an hour. So many vehicles, so many drones, unfortunately, so many real people who give their lives. And when we have to explain ourselves, or we have to wait, something is delayed, for example, it's not just about waiting. It's not just like you're waiting for something that you want. It takes lives, inches of territory, and I think it's extremely, from one point of view, it's really good not to understand what war is, but from the other point of view, sometimes simply trust like Ukrainians without undermining the size of war, because it is huge, and how it interferes in the life of an ordinary Ukrainian is extreme. And it's starting like from blackouts, which are minor, and air raid alerts that simply interrupt your life in even in a semi-safe region, when banks are not working, doctors are not working, or I don't know, anything else. And finishing with this, a lot of cups dropped on a tiny town when Russia applies scorched earth policy, and we understand it's not about the territory, it's not about the resource, it's simply about the destruction of the country, the culture. And sometimes I have a question as a Ukrainian that witnessing so many Russian crimes, understanding that Russia violated all international agreements, Russia killed thousands of Ukrainian civilians, Russia erased beautiful regions, Russia blown up Kakhovka Dam, so many things. Russia hijacked Zaporizhzhia nuclear power station. Why do we still need to explain or get a question like maybe Russia should have been invited on a peace? No, no. At this moment, this is a terrorist state, non-negotiable. After the defeat of Russia, collapse of the Kremlin regime, punishment, reparations, we can start talking and inviting Russia, but once again, not as an equal partner until they are de-zombified. So I think this size of Ukrainian tragedy and the thing that even in such times, we remain normal, reliable, and just have a look at that, understanding that, for example, using long-range missiles, we could have prevented, for example, the attack on a building hypermarket and save human lives. We were not allowed, and we did not break the restriction of our partners, even in such times. So thank you for the lifting of this ban, but there are many others that actually limit Ukrainian ability to win this war faster, saving more lives and finishing this evil faster.
Absolutely, that is indeed the strategy which every person, or not only Ukrainians, but anyone who is deeply connected to Ukraine and to Ukrainian cause, feels with a lot of pain every day when we look at this war, and we know that despite the fact we are doing everything we can, it is not enough, and the world has enough resources to stop this war if there would have been decisiveness to do this. Like when I hear every time these sayings like the GDP of the NATO countries is that much higher that one of Russia, that's why Russia doesn't have any chance to win this war, I want to explode every time, because I want to ask, okay, and where is this GDP? Why don't we see at least a half of military expenditures being sent to Ukraine? I know how important it is for Ukraine to get Patriot systems, Iris-T, Leopard tanks, Abrams tanks, HIMARS, Caesar artillery systems, Panzerhaubitze 2000, and others. It's all good and right that Ukraine has got them, but why that late? Why that few? Why was that restrictions? Why we needed to get Kharkiv being erased, like in several districts, erased, Kharkiv power plants completely destroyed, Zaporizhzhia Dnipro dam hit, and Tripilska power station destroyed, Burstinska power station destroyed, before Ukraine got a very legal permission to use Western provided missiles against Russian sovereign territory to hit the missile launching pads, which is absolutely legal from the point of view of international law, UN law, our civil letters, everything. It is legal. Why this permission hasn't been given before? Thank you so much, Anna, for putting it so clear that this war is a daily terror for millions of Ukrainians, and it should be stopped as soon as possible by Ukrainian victory and by demilitarization of Russia. And that is what I'm pretty sure that Operator Starsky knows it much better as a person who personally fought in Ukrainian army, who is a veteran. When you face the Russian army and you fight them back, there is no option to negotiate, because they are non-negotiable. There are things which are non-negotiable.
Absolutely. I remember when our chaplain returned from the occupied Hostomel after the Battle of Hostomel, when we moved out of the base and returned home. Our chaplain and his family stayed in Hostomel for a couple of days, and then he returned. And I talked about it just today. I met him and we hugged. And then we talked, and I saw that his eyes were absolutely empty. And he said, and he was like wearing cross, and he said, I'm not sure that there's God anymore. I'm like, what happened? He's like, first of all, after what I saw in Hostomel, what Russians did, I'm not sure that there's God anymore. And second thing, I want to take a rifle and go fight them. That's words of like the most peaceful person I could ever imagine, right? And just so people could understand, because Anna said absolutely correct thing. A lot of people don't understand the scale. As of today, 250,000 private houses are destroyed in Ukraine. 27 multi-story apartment buildings destroyed by Russian bombs, tanks, by Russian munitions. Russian army that consists of approximately 700,000 to 800,000 men already committed 120,000 crimes, and those are only official cases that were launched by the Ukrainian Ministry of Interior and Ukrainian court. There's many more crimes that we don't know about, but basically 800,000 men committed 120,000 crimes officially. That's just several numbers so people could understand the scale of what happens. And currently Ukraine, second Europe's biggest country, is the most mined country in the world. There are people who still find bombs in places like Germany, decades, almost a century already after the World War II. Imagine how many years from now we will still discover munitions in Ukraine after all that crap that Russia launched or dug into our oil. So that's just so people could imagine what happens. I'm already not talking about like 10 million Ukrainian refugees in Europe and inside of Ukraine. So this is something that we have to face. Unfortunately, I cannot tell exactly which combat is more important. I was asked by Jake Bro about it the other day, and I really cannot say, because, you know, every battle is important. A battle that we are fighting in the informational environment is very important. Without informational environment, without informational influence, Russia will lose. At the same time, battle that we're fighting on the battlefield is important, because guys there are sacrificing their lives and their health. And literally from this standpoint, nothing can be more important than those guys right now. Literally fighting right there. They are more important than, I don't know, anyone, you know, anybody of us. So every battle is important. It's very important to stick to our mission, to stick to our goal, do whatever we can do wherever we are and with whatever we have, right? And motivate each other every day. All of us require motivation. Everybody, people in the trenches, as well as people behind keyboards, as well as people donating, as well as people fundraising. One thing that we all forget is we all require motivation. Even like the most, I don't know, most motivated people that I know, everyone. So this is something we should remember. Let's remember that we are big global team of people united around democratic values, around ideas of freedom. Let's not just support, but respect each other, because there's a lot of people with different views, but same goal, right? Let's respect each other regardless of what we are and who we are, and just keep doing what we're doing. Let's remember that there's still a lot of work, unfortunately, but we will definitely win, because evil will always be punished. Supporters of the Russian terrorism are unable to fundraise for the Russian terrorists as much as we do. They're not able to support them with things like HIMARS, things like Abrams, things like even trucks that guys are sending to our guys on the front lines. Well, what do we see on the enemy side? We see, like, I don't know, sleepers, power banks, like she jars. Oh my god, what we're talking about, guys. We will win, but we should stick together, and we should remember that we must be responsible for each other, right? And we must always motivate each other to go on, and we will win.
Absolutely, and that is what we experience every day. We know how many people volunteered for the Ukrainian army, absolutely peaceful people. And I spent 6 years in Ukraine working in Kiev mostly, but like going from Kramatorsk and Severodonetsk to Odessa, from Kherson to Chernihiv, Sumy, Lutsk, etc. And all people like I met, like we worked mostly with grassroots movements, with people who wanted to create co-working spaces for NGOs, build bicycle lanes, create, like in Zaporizhia, some environmental projects, monitoring quality of air, or in Mariupol, like monitoring air quality because of 2 steel plants, etc. None of them wanted to be a soldier. None of them wished at war, and many of them are in the army now. The students of sociology, feminist activists, environmental leaders, historians, teachers, everyone, like people from absolutely peaceful professions. There is no such thing as people who are not created for the army, but there is a situation when people are being called for the army because their country, their nation is being under attack, and the enemy wants to kill them all. And we know what Russians did in the occupied territories. That is why we support Ukraine. That is why we stay with Ukraine. And that is why people like Anna and Andriy, Operator Starsky, they're so important, because they explain it every day. And they are more effective and more important than the whole departments of Western foreign ministries, or like other institutions, because they win hearts and minds of citizens. And we live in democracies, and people decide what direction our countries will go and should go. And people can donate. That is what Operator Starsky said is absolutely amazing, because people donate for Ukrainian army from all the world, from New Zealand, Canada, Germany, Italy, Romania, Mexico, from all countries in the world. We see it in this chart. And you guys, Anna and Andriy, you are doing amazing job. Thank you so much. You are real heroes who help us all nations in the world, to live tomorrow in a more peaceful, open, and democratic society, community, in peace. That's what we were granted for 60 years after World War II, and what is now being challenged by Russia. But you guys help us all to awake tomorrow in a peaceful world. Thank you so much for that. And don't forget to subscribe to Anna's channel. I'm sure you have done it already. Anna from Ukraine, Operator Starsky. Subscribe right now if you have not yet. Like, subscribe, share, because you will never be sorry for having done these several clicks, because you will be provided with all the best information you may wish. You will even like be informed about things you never imagined they exist, but then you will realize that is exactly what you needed to understand this war and this conflict, and you will be a better person after you have watched videos by Operator Starsky and Anna from Ukraine. Trust me. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And thank you, everyone, that you have spent your time watching this live stream. I see you have spent, like many of you, spent like over 1 hour with us. Amazing. Thank you so much. Huge honor to have you. And thank you for your donations. You have donated over $100 to during this chat, maybe more. I will check it later. All the money will go into Ukrainian army needs. Next week, I will go to Avdiivka sector, delivering new batch of drones for the 47th Mechanized Brigade. But we also support the 93rd Brigade. We also support territorial defense units, heroes, real heroes who are not that much represented in the media. They don't get that much donations. That is why it is important to. Oh, I see Canadian dollar have just landed in the chat. Thank you so much. And territorial defense units are not that much represented in the media. They don't get that much donation, but they do a lot of hard work. They need to be supported. And Ukraine, every Ukrainian fights for Ukraine on his or her spot. And that is why we need to stay with Ukraine. Thank you so much.